I can still remember glimpses of my childhood before it was stolen away from me. There were happy memories that I held on to when things got bad. Dad wasn't really like that, but as we got older, my mom used to argue a lot. It was bad, really bad. I think some of the neighbors knew what was going on. You could see it in their eyes. Liam and I used to pretend it wasn't happening until we couldn't anymore. One day, it all erupted. Get out! Get out! I remember the shouting, the chaos. Then the ambulance came. It took Mum away, and we didn't see her again for a long time. After that, Liam and I looked after ourselves for about a week, just waiting for Mum to come back. The police were kind, but someone decided we had to go live with Nan and Poppy. They never really wanted us, and things just got worse. I didn't like the way Poppy looked at me. I don't think Nan did either. He'd say, "Got a kiss for your granddad," and it made my skin crawl. I avoided him as much as I could. School became my escape. Miss Casey, my teacher, was kind. She'd say things like, "Would you like me to braid your hair? It'll look pretty." It was a small comfort in a very dark time. But even those moments of kindness didn't last. Nan didn't approve of anything that brought us joy. I remember one day, she saw my hair braided and screamed, "What the hell is this? Who did this to your hair?" She went on, raging about how I'd turn into something she despised. Liam tried to stand up for me, but it only made things worse. We were silent witnesses to our own nightmare. By 16, I couldn't take it anymore. I ran away. The next 20 years were a blur of falling in and out of toxic relationships, numbing my pain with drugs and alcohol, and losing custody of my kids. Sometimes the memories were too much, and I tried to end it all. Years of silence, denial, and neglect took their toll. At 16, I fled, seeking escape, but instead finding a cycle of abusive relationships and substance abuse. The pain of my childhood festered, leading to a loss of control and, at times, a loss of hope. It wasn't until I reached out for help through therapy that I began to reclaim my life. I found local therapy groups and began the long journey of healing. Slowly, I regained custody of my kids. I'm in a healthy relationship now, and for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm living a happy, safe life. When I look back at my childhood, I just wish someone had spoken up, but no one did.
This is the story of silent pain, the kind that hides behind closed doors and unspoken words at home. If this resonates with your own experience, we invite you to share your story in the comments or with someone you trust. Because stories like these aren't just about the past, they ripple into the present, shaping families and futures in ways we may not realize. In our next video, we'll dive deeper into the cycle of generational trauma, how it's passed down, and how we can break the chain. Make sure to join us as we uncover the tools and understanding needed to heal, not just for ourselves, but for those who come after us. You don't have to stay silent. Let's start the conversation. For a long time, scientists believed that it wasn't possible to alter our genetic code. After all, the genes that make up our DNA contain all the information about who we are. They provide instructions to the body's cells and determine everything from the color of our eyes to the functioning of our lungs, and even our susceptibility to diseases such as cancer or diabetes. But the life one leads, along with other factors, makes it more complex. Imagine two identical twin brothers. Their DNA is the same, yet their lives are very different. One leads a calm life, while the other has a stressful job. One exercises more frequently, but the other maintains a better diet. Over time, the twins begin to develop distinct characteristics or even different health conditions. How can this happen when their genome is exactly the same? Let's dive in as we uncover transgenerational trauma through the works of GaborMate.
So trauma is not just personal, it's also cultural and it's historical, and it's also transgenerational. And we just can't help passing it on. So if I carry trauma, I can be sure to pass it on to my kids unless I've resolved it, worked it out. And to the extent that I've resolved it, I don't pass it on. And to the extent that I haven't resolved it, we do pass it on. And now if you look at the larger question of why are so many kids being diagnosed, well, you know it can't be a genetic problem because genes don't change in a population over 5 years or 10 years. So if you're seeing much more ADHD in Norway now, there's a good reason for it. And the reason is that must be, and I don't know much about Norway, but the reason must be that the parenting environment is less and less comfortable for kids. The parents are more and more stressed. The parents are more and more busy. The parents are more and more distracted. Marriages are more conflictual. Maybe there's more depressed people around. Economic stress for both people to work. Communities maybe are less connected. There's less and less of that village, of that attachment village, of that hunter-gatherer type union between people. So because that's what globalization does, is it just keeps destroying and destroying and destroying the basis of human existence in the name of economic progress. And so more and more parents are stressed. Guess what? More kids are going to get diagnosed. And then we say, the kid's got a disease, let's give him a pill. Rather than looking at, well, what is it about the environment? Because the good news is, and I'll talk about that later again if I have a chance, is that the brain can develop new circuits, as I mentioned before. The question is, what conditions is required for that? And if we really understood the implications of the science and the wisdom, then the questions would be asking ourselves, okay, if all these kids are developing problems, what conditions are causing that? And what conditions do we have to create to lead them in a new direction, to help them reconnect?
Epigenetics is the study of how chemical modifications can influence the activity of our DNA without altering its sequence. The set of chemicals that mark the genome and instruct cells on what to do is known as the epigenome. To better understand this, think of DNA as an instruction manual that dictates how a cell should function. Every cell in your body has one of these manuals, and the epigenome acts like a person using colored markers to highlight or suppress different parts of the manual. Some sections are emphasized as important, while others are crossed out and ignored. This process is enabled by the way DNA is organized within cells. Nearly 2 meters of DNA is tightly packed into a compact structure by wrapping around proteins called histones. While this organization helps fit DNA into a tiny cell, it also restricts access to certain genes. Epigenetic marks modify this structure by compressing or decompressing the DNA. Compressed DNA is inaccessible, effectively turning genes off, while decompressed DNA allows the cell to read and activate those genes. Epigenetic regulation begins early, starting as soon as the first cells of a human embryo begin dividing. This is why a mother's diet, emotional state, physical health, and even the medicines and vitamins she takes during pregnancy are critical. Chemical signals from the mother's blood can influence the baby's epigenome. For example, a poor maternal diet during pregnancy can program the baby's epigenome to store more calories, increasing the likelihood of obesity later in life. Historical studies of women who endured prolonged famine during wars have shown similar outcomes in their offspring. Fathers also play a role in transmitting epigenetic marks. A father's lifestyle, such as smoking heavily from a young age, can influence the health and life expectancy of his children and even his grandchildren. Epigenetic changes continue to act on our bodies throughout life. Factors like habits, diet, experiences, and the environment can switch genes on or off, as seen in studies of identical twins whose different lifestyles result in varied health outcomes. Epigenetics also reveals how trauma can potentially be passed across generations. In one experiment, male mice were conditioned to associate the smell of cherry blossom with pain from an electric shock. Their offspring, despite never encountering the same conditions, exhibited nervous reactions to the smell. This sensitivity persisted into the third generation. Scientists discovered epigenetic marks on a gene linked to odor detection and observed an increase in neurons sensitive to the cherry blossom scent. However, this doesn't mean we are destined to inherit all the emotions and experiences of our ancestors. Scientists are still exploring how trauma transmission occurs in humans, and there's promising evidence that these epigenetic changes are reversible. This could open doors to therapies that reprogram harmful markers to improve health. For instance, researchers are investigating drugs to reverse markers that contribute to tumor development. Similarly, epigenetic research holds potential for treating conditions like diabetes, lupus, Alzheimer's, and even addictions. The challenge lies in developing therapies that specifically target negative markers without affecting beneficial ones. Epigenetics demonstrates that our genetic fate is not fixed. By positively influencing our epigenome, we can not only improve our own health, but also benefit future generations. This science represents a hopeful shift in how we understand and harness the potential of our DNA. Okay, so let's talk about trauma because wow, it's everywhere, right? And it's not just like, oh, you had a bad day kind of trauma. It's deeper. It's personal and cultural, historical, generational. Like it's woven into the fabric of who we are without us even realizing it sometimes. And here's the kicker. We pass it on without even trying. I mean, think about that. If you're carrying unresolved trauma, it's like this invisible backpack you hand off to your kids. Not intentionally, of course. Nobody wants to do that. But if you don't deal with your stuff, guess what? It doesn't just disappear. It finds a way to stick around through the way you parent, the way you react, the way you are. It's wild. But here's the hopeful bit. To the extent that we do work through it, when we face it, process it, heal from it, we don't pass it on as much. Like, you can break the chain, at least partly. That's powerful, right? But man, it's hard work. And if we zoom out, it's not just about us as individuals. It's a bigger societal thing too. Now about kids today, why are so many of them being diagnosed with stuff like ADHD? It's not like our genes suddenly changed overnight. Genes don't work that fast. So it's got to be the environment. And look, I'm not an expert on Norway or wherever, but this pattern is universal. Parents are more stressed, more distracted, more overworked. The whole "it takes a village" thing? That's just gone in a lot of places. Communities aren't as tight. Everyone's just surviving, you know? Globalization, economic pressure, nonstop busyness. It's like the world is just pulling us further and further away from what we need. And kids, they're little sponges. They soak it all up. If the world around them feels chaotic, disconnected, or stressful, they're going to show it in their behavior. Then we label it a disease and give them a pill instead of asking, what's really going on here? Here's the good news. The brain is amazing. It can change, rewire, adapt if we create the right conditions. But that's the hard part, right? Figuring out what those conditions are and making them happen. Like, how do we create an environment where kids and parents can actually thrive? where connection, support, and calm are the norm instead of the exception? These are big questions, but they're the ones we need to be asking. If we keep focusing on quick fixes, diagnoses, medication, without addressing the root causes, we're just going to keep running in circles. We've got to think bigger, heal bigger, because this isn't just about one family or one kid. It's about all of us. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Inside Serene, a channel dedicated to helping you navigate your healing journey. Together, we can break free from the chains of addiction, trauma, and chronic stress and embrace a brighter future.